friends, it's Christy. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be making a card using Lawn Fawn's Porcupine for You Terrific Day add-on, Two Can Do It, Butterfly Kisses, Our Friendship Grows, and You Are Sublime. So I've stamped the images I'll be using on 2 panels of Spectrum Noir Ultra Smooth Premium White cardstock with Lawn Fawn Jet Black ink, and I'll be coloring with my Copic markers. I'm starting with my porcupines, and I'm going to be using some E70 shades. I did Google what porcupines look like, and I thought that this was the closest combination that I could use to look the most natural. So I'm using the darkest 3 shades on the body, starting with that E79, laying in some shadows. I'm just going to do one of these porcupines at a time. So for this guy, he is facing toward the right hand side, so his shadows are going to fall down the left, right up under where those quills would be. And then I blended out with the E77, and now I'm coming in with the E74. I did decide to leave a little bit of area on the lower part of the face and the belly to be a little bit softer, and I also threw the E74 in on the quills, and then I'll finish off the belly area with the E71. I'm also going to add that into the quills for the mid-tone. And then I'm going to bring in the E70 for the highlight on the quills, just filling in that area so it's nice and full. And I also added a bit of that to the nose, which I will come in with some pink later on, but I wanted it to have this kind of light gray or grayish undertone to it. And then I'm going to color the second porcupine, which is my female in this card. And she is facing toward the left, so her shadows are going to fall down the right hand side. But other than that, I'm coloring her exactly the same, using the darkest 3 shades for the main part of her belly, and then I'm going to use the E71 on the belly. But the E74 is going to be the darkest on the quills, and then I'll blend down all the way to the E70. So the quills are going to be lighter than the body, but that's the way they looked in the photos that I Googled, so that's what I decided to do for them. Then I wanted to add in some rosy cheeks, so I'm bringing in RV11 and RV13 for that. I went with some darker shades because they are quite dark. So I started with the RV13 and then blended out the edge with the RV11, and I also used the RV11 to fill in the ears and the nose. And then I added RV14 to that combo, and I'm going to color in the frosting on the birthday cake, starting with the RV14 for a little bit of shadow, and then blending out with the RV13. My RV13 always leaks on me, so I just pulled off the other cap. I could see that it was getting ready to, so I pulled off the other cap to equalize the pressure in the barrel, and that stopped it immediately. And then I just continued coloring with the RV11 for the highlight. I'm also going to do the little tulips in these shades. I'm going to do both of those the same. I have one on this panel and one on the second panel, and I'll be coloring this second panel off screen to save some time in the video just because there are so many images for this card. But I did color in the butterfly with this hot pink combo, and I'm going to do one of the stripes on the banners on the stump, which is going to become my tea party table. For the bark of that stump, I'm going to use E55, E57, and E59, starting with the E59 and laying in some shadow, and I'm just basing this on how that stump is drawn. So any areas that are kind of sticking out of the stump, more forward, are going to be the light areas because they would catch the most light, and then any areas that are kind of pushed back and recessed are going to be the darker areas because they would be cast in more shadow. So once I have the shadows laid in with that E59, I'm going to start blending out with the E57. I really do love the E50s for wood. I just think it has such a warm really comforting color palette to it, depending on which shades you use, but I like to use the whole range between the regular outer part of the wood and then also the cut part of the wood, which I always do a little bit lighter. But I'm blending out that E57 with the E55 now, so that's going to be the lightest on the bark. And then while I have these colors out, I'll also do the bark on the smaller stump. That is going to be a stool, and that is from the Porcupine for You stamp set. I'm also going to do the lid on the acorn teapot, and I just did both of these at once since they were really close together and pretty small to color, so I didn't have to keep switching back and forth between markers. So I'll just fill in that acorn cap. I love that little teapot. I think it's such a cute little image. And I'm also going to do the shell on my snail. So I just put the lightest shade up at the top. Then I'm moving on to my lighter E50s. I'm using E50, E51, and E53 for the cut part of the wood, so the inner part of the wood. The E53 I'm placing on the outer edges and then blending toward the center with the E51 and then the E50. I'm also going to do the outer part of my acorn teapot with these shades. Then I'll do all of my mushroom stems, and for that I started with the E51 and meant to blend out with the E50, but I accidentally grabbed the E53. I'll use just the E50 and E51 for the inner part of my cake, so it's just going to be a vanilla cake. Starting with the E51 and blending out with the E50, and then I also use the E50 to add a tiny bit of shading to the white spots on all of my mushrooms. Next, I'm going to bring in a red combo. I'm using R22, R24, and R29, and I'm going to do part of the left pennant banner on that stump. I just put the darkest at the top and the lightest at the bottom. I'm also going to do the center of my cake to have maybe like a cherry filling or strawberry filling. And I'm thinking cherry because it also has those little circles on the top, which I'm imagining are cherries. So I just filled those all in with the R24. And then I'm also going to do all of my mushrooms with this combo. So I'm starting with the R29 on the right hand side, and I'll be blending toward the left. So I have that first and then blending out with the R24, just taking that out a little bit further and coloring carefully around those little circles, the little spots, because otherwise I would have to fix them with a white gel pen because it would be pretty hard to push the red back out of them. So just being careful, trying not to get it in there in the first place. It's a little bit trickier on this mushroom on the end because the spots are quite small, but anyway, I managed it just fine. Then I'm going to move on to some yellows. I just wanted to have an extra little pop of something bright and sunshiny in there, so I used Y13, YR23, and YR24. I'm going to do the spots on the center banner and also the body of my snail. So for the snail's body, I did use all three shades, starting with the YR24 at the back and then the Y13 on the face. Then I'm moving on to some pale aquas. I'm using BG10, BG11, and BG13 to do the cake stand. And I started with the BG13, and then I'm blending toward the center with the BG11, and then I'll fill in with the BG10. Then I'll use just the BG10 to add a little bit of shading to the white scallop on the cake. I still wanted it to look white, I just wanted to give it some definition, so I added a touch of that. I'm also going to use the BG11 and BG10 to make my plate and my little teacup look white. So I just left some white cardstock on the end for the highlight. And I'm also going to do the center pennant banner, just coloring carefully around those yellow polka dots. And then I'm going to move on to some greens. The first green combo I'm using is G12, G14, and G16. And I'm going to do the leaf up at the top, which is from Our Friendship Grows. And I'm going to do the leaf of the tulip and the center stripe on the red pennant banner, which kind of makes it look like Christmas with the red and green, but it's going to be mostly covered up in the final card anyway, so it's not really a big deal. I also did my grasses with this combo, but I did darken it up. I took away the G12 and added in the G28. And I'm going to do that kind of kelpie looking plant that is from You Are Sublime, and do that in this combo as well. And I started with the G16, blended out with the G14, and then I'm going to go back with the G28 and add a little extra pop of darkness right at the base of each leaf. Then I wanted to go with a warmer green combo, and I used G21, G23, and G25. I'm going to do the outer part of the pennant banner that is on the right, and then I'm also going to do the leafy plant that is from Toucan Do It. And I did it the same treatment as I did with the small kelp green plant. I just started with the midtone, the YG23, blended out with the YG21, and then I'm going to come back in and add a little extra depth right at the base of each leaf with the YG25. I also did that small leaf with this combo, and then I will bring in both panels so you can see those and trim the images out with their matching dies. For my background, I'm starting with a piece of Bristol smooth surface cardstock, and I am going to blend on some Distress Oxide inks using the Lawn Fawn Cloudy Stencil. This is the Salvage Patina Distress Oxide ink, which is my favorite to use for sky backgrounds. So I'm just starting on that stencil and blending with firmer pressure as I leave it, and then softer pressure as I go up the panel so that it gets a little bit more hazy. I just really like the look of that. And I'm going to do 3 different cloud formations here. That's about as far as I need to go because I also want to have a good bit of grass down at the bottom. I will blend on a little bit of extra ink just so that bottom row of clouds doesn't look so stark white. And then I'll also do a bit of splatter detail just by pressing that ink onto an acrylic block. I'm going to add a bit of water to that and mix it up to make it more fluid. I'm using a thin paintbrush so I can get really fine droplets, and then I'll just tap that off the side of the block, and then I can set this panel aside to dry for a few minutes. And then I'm going to add in my grass, and I'm going to use the slimline grassy stencils from Lawn Fawn. You could use the regular size, but this is just the one that I have, and it works for both, so why not? But I'm lining that up somewhere about halfway down the card. It's a little less than halfway, but almost. And then I'm going to blend on some Mowed Lawn Distress Oxide ink, just holding that stencil firmly in place and doing about half of what remains. And then I will bring in some Twisted Citron for the bottom. I think these 2 shades together really match with the YG20 shades that I used for those last leaves. And I will go back and forth a bit to make sure I have a nice blend between these 2. And then I'll also do some splatter detail with that Mowed Lawn, just by pressing that ink onto the block again and just repeating that process, splattering it all over. I left the stencil in place so it would protect the sky so that it doesn't get green little spots all over it. And then once I'm happy with how that's looking, I can remove that stencil to reveal the background and then just set that aside to dry. In the meantime, I'm going to take some dark brown wood grain cardstock and die cut that with the largest stitch scalloped rectangle frame. And I can save that inner part that the die cuts out for another card, but for today I'm just going to use that frame, so I will pop that out. And then I'm going to work on my sentiment. So I'm going to add that background piece to my Misty. And I'm going to take a sentiment from Party Animal. I wanted this to be a birthday card, so I'm using the one that says Happy Birthday. And I'm inking that up with VersaFine Onyx Black ink. And because this is such a bold sentiment, it actually stamped down perfectly the first time. So I'm just going to set that aside to dry. I'm also doing an insert for the inside of today's card, and I'm stamping that in chili pepper ink. So I'm doing the little couple from Porcupine for You, and then the sentiment and the little cake are both from Party Animal. And I just stamped down part of that again because it didn't quite get enough ink on there. But now I've added some very thin strips of foam tape to the back of that stitched scallop rectangle frame. And I'm going to line that up very carefully over the edge of my background to make sure it's on there nice and straight. And then once I'm happy with it, I'll pop that down into place. Then I'll add some liquid glue to the back of that, and I'm going to adhere it to a Lawn Fawn Barn Red card base. So I scored and folded that to be a standard A2 size card. I'm actually going to add the insert to the inside first. So you can see that I trimmed that down to be 4 by 5 1/4, which makes it fit perfectly in there with just a little bit of a border. And then I'll glue that whole panel to the card front. Just making sure once again that it's on there nice and straight, and removing any little bits that were kind of hanging down there so that it looks nice and clean. And then I can bring in my images. So I've added some foam tape to the back of my main images, including this little tree stump, which is going to be the table for my tea party scene. So I'm going to add that in the center. I was very careful to only add foam tape in the center of that so that there's plenty of room to tuck things behind. And then I'm also going to add the 2 smaller stumps on either side of the tree stump, because that's going to be the little stools for my porcupines to stand on. I've added foam tape to the back of them as well. So I'm just positioning them where I want them. But then I remembered I need to tuck things behind, so I made sure that he wasn't like fully pressed down so that I could still adjust him as I need to. And then I'm going to go right in with all of my greenery that I want to tuck in the back, because I want to get those in place before that porcupine gets securely pressed down. So I'm just going to play around with the different long leaves. I wanted to have these kind of growing up behind that tree stump and just giving more of a forest look. So I'm adding those here and there wherever I think they look good. I'm also going to trim some of them down so that they are at different lengths so that it looks a little bit more natural. So for this one that I'm adding on the right, I took off one section of leaves, and then I'm going to add in a third one, and for that I'm taking off 2 sections of leaves to make it even shorter. And then I'll just tuck that in as well. And then I've got another one of those long green kelp plants, and I'm going to add that to kind of just break up the 2 different greens that are in that background and give a bit more of a vibrant pop of green in there. So now that I've got those background leaves in position, I can start to decorate the table. And so I'm going to need to use a little bit of foam tape plus some liquid glue for some of the items, like this tree stand, because it starts off on the stump, but then it ends up extending above that. So since the stump is popped up, I need to add a little piece of foam tape to the cake stand, and again with the cake, just to make sure everything is nice and level. And then I'm also going to add in the slices of cake and the teapot and the teacups. So I'm just arranging a nice little birthday celebration scene here. I wanted the boy porcupine, the one on the left, to be pouring the tea. So I'm going to put that teapot in his hand since that is outstretched. So I'm just tipping that a bit so it looks like it's actually being poured. And then underneath that, I'm going to add the teacup, one of the teacups. I'm also going to adhere down a slice of cake, although I do end up moving that in just a minute and repositioning that. And I decided to have the girl porcupine actually holding one of the slices of cake just to, give her something interesting in her hands as well. So I'm going to put that over there. So I moved the one that was over toward her side more toward the middle. And then I'll add her teacup in between those two cake slices. And then I realized that the cups looked kind of empty, so I added a little bit of tea in them with the E53 marker. And then I'm just going to keep on arranging things here. I've got a lot of little bits and pieces because I really wanted this to look like a nice forest scene. So I've got mushrooms and leaves and grasses and flowers, and I'm just going to work my way around the scene and tuck them in here and there and create a scene that is really nice and full. I really wanted to have a full scene. I haven't done one of these in a little while, and I do really enjoy them, just having a lot of detail. When I was a little kid, I loved picture books where there was just a lot of detail and you could spend like whole minutes just staring at a single page because there was so much to look at. And actually, when my children were small, I would buy them books like that as well because it would just keep them occupied. If you had to be someplace like a doctor's office or anything, I would bring those kinds of books along with me and point out all of the little different tiny details. And that usually kept them pretty entertained. So I just happen to love scenes with lots of detail. And I know realistically, we can't do them all the time because it just involves so many images and so much coloring and stamping and all of that. But every once in a while, I like to do a card like this because I just, I don't know, it just feels very nostalgic to me and brings me a lot of joy. So I'm just working my way around this scene and trying to use up all of the images that I stamped and colored. Just few left, so I'm going to continue adding those and just making sure that that scene looks nice and full and well balanced. So for instance, I'm adding that little mushroom down that is a little bit closer to the sentiment, and I did tuck a leaf in beside it. But then the left side felt like it had an empty space above the word happy, so that's where I'm going to add my snail. So it's just kind of creating a little bit of balance throughout the scene. I'm also going to add this little butterfly trail up at the top right of the card, and then I'll add the little butterfly at the end of that, also popped up on foam tape. And then I just have a couple of leaves left, so I'm just kind of moving those around and seeing where they look best. And then I ended up with just one leaf left that I couldn't really find a place for. It didn't look quite right wherever I tried it, so I ended up not using that leaf because it was a bit too large to squeeze in. But other than that, I used everything that I stamped and colored. Of course, I needed to finish off this card with a little bit of sparkle, so I'm using Stardust Stickles to add a little bit of shimmer to my butterfly's wings, to the inner jelly and the cherries on top of my cake. I added some to the tulips and the center of the other flower, and also to the tea in the mugs. But that's about it. I didn't go too crazy. And that is going to finish up this card. So I'm going to lift that up so you can see all of that detail. And I will give you another peek at the inside as well. I really hope you guys enjoyed this one. Definitely leave me a comment down below and let me know if you're a fan of these really detailed cards with so many images, or if you prefer to keep it simple. If you did like this one, please be sure to hit that thumbs up button and leave me a comment down below. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and ring that notification bell if you want to be alerted whenever I post new videos. All of the products I use will be listed and linked in the description bar below in case you'd like to pick up anything for yourself. And if you'd like to keep watching, here are 2 extra videos I thought you might also enjoy. Thank you so much for spending your time with me today. I hope you had a good one, and I'll see you soon in another video. Bye-bye.